we should get started. I wanted to welcome you to the Woods Hole Public Library. This is our final Nancy Lassalle Dance Lecture for the 2018 season. I want to let you know that we met this morning with Nancy and we're talking about possibilities for 2019. And so if any of you have suggestions, people that you know, that you think might be interested, please get in touch with me and I will forward it on to the rest of the dance committee. I'd also like to mention that we're in the Radcliffe room this evening. Mm-hmm. This room is the home of a very nice dance collection right over here behind Joni that was donated most of the volumes were donated by Gretchen, thank you. By Gretchen. And so this is a collection that's available for you to check out. It's available, and I want to call attention to that. Then I have two more things, or maybe three. So we're winding down the summer season. Next Monday, 7:30, we will be in this room, and Ellen Weiss will be here reading from her recent work. And then on Wednesday evening, Keith Gesson, the author of a recently reviewed New York Times book called A Terrible Country, will be here and he will talk about his book. And then finally, we have some handouts, and on your way out, if you haven't taken one, please do. This is more information about where Adam will be next. And then this is a nice photograph of George Balanchine given to us by Nancy Lassalle. She took it in 1961. And it's a great postcard or memento of dance. Okay, and then finally, you silence your devices.
A terrible country, what night is that?
That's Wednesday night, the 29th at 7:30, also in this room.
This Wednesday we have...
Oh, yes. Thank you.
Tomorrow.
Thank you. Tomorrow evening at 7:30, we have our final social justice book group where we'll be discussing This Is an Uprising.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so now, do we have enough seats here?
Yep.
Okay. All right.
Very cozy.
I guess I'm going to take, well, no, I have to sit back here because I have to work the machine some. Okay, so I think we're about ready. Okay.
Good evening. I'm Laura Angolia, and I'm absolutely delighted to introduce you to Adam H. Weinert this evening. He is a performing artist, choreographer based in New York City. And before I go into the really exciting part of what I want to say about him, let me give you just a bit of his background. Adam began his training at the School of American Ballet, and he continued at Vassar College and at the Juilliard School, where we just discovered that my roommate at Jacob's Pillow was one of his teachers. He also went to New York University, where he recently earned a master's degree under the tutelage of André Lepecki. Adam has danced with the Metropolitan Opera Ballet Company, the Mark Morris Dance Group, Shenway Dance Arts, and Christopher Williams, and for 6 years served as the artistic associate to Jonah Bakar. In addition to his performance work, Adam has been published in the New York Times, the Juilliard Journal, and as a featured profile in New York Magazine. He produced and choreographed an award-winning collection of dance film shorts, screened nationally and abroad, and his performance works have toured to 4 continents, including a number of non-traditional dance venues, such as the Museum of Modern Art, which you'll hear about tonight, the Tate Britain Museum, and the Tate Modern Museum. He was awarded Presidential Distinction and Scholastic Distinction from the Juilliard School, and in 2008 received the Hector
Zaraspy
Prize for Outstanding Choreography. He's currently a visiting artist in residence at Bard College. My husband Nick, who's back there, and I first met Adam in 2016 at Jacob's Pillow. During the festival, he premiered his critically acclaimed work, Monument. Now, Monument was a work that combined original contemporary choreography and beautifully revived works by legends of modern dance, including Ted Shawn, who was the founder of Jacob's Pillow and, as most of you know, modern dance pioneer. Now, while at the Pillow, we were lucky enough to spend time with Adam, and we learned about his work as a Jacob's Pillow research scholar. We were fascinated when he described his in-depth research of Ted Shawn and the subsequent very innovative path that it led him to follow. In his talk this evening, Dancing in the Museum, Adam will chronicle his commission to re-perform historic solos created by Ted Shawn, and the rather, shall I say it? So, isn't that funny? It's like, all of a sudden, excuse me, everybody, I've lost my surreptitious means that followed him to do so at the Museum of Modern Art. Before I turn this over to Adam, I want you to know that he's going to be returning to Jacob's Pillow in September with Dance of the Ages, and it's a unique, epic ensemble work that was created by Ted Shawn in 1938. Shawn considered this to be the summit of his achievements as a choreographer, and it was the first evening-length modern dance ever presented. It was also one of the last works that Ted Shawn performed with created with his men dancers, and Adam is recreating Dance of the Ages. He's going to be at Jacob's Pillow in September 21st, 22nd, 23rd. The entire pillow is going to be recreated as it was back then. There are flyers back there, and with information on how you can get tickets if you're interested. And that's it for me. Here's Adam.
Thank you for that. And hello, everyone. It is such a pleasure to be here. It's a very special part of the world. I'm getting to know the Cape a little bit and like it here. Before I get too far, I kind of want to get a sense, how many of us are familiar with Ted Shawn? Right? How cool is that? Did anyone get to work with Ted Shawn? Study with him? A little bit? We're shy. Okay. So Ted Shawn, he founded Jacob's Pillow. He started the first school for modern dance and trained Martha Graham, Doris Humphrey, Charles Weidman, a lot of people who then became very well-known, canonized choreographers. I sort of found him fascinating because even though many of his students became very famous, a lot of people still don't really know who he is. And I'm still trying to figure out exactly why that is. So I probably have to do a lot of things. Anyway, my story with Ted Shawn began, well, as a student at Jacob's Pillow. I studied there in 2003, 15 years ago. And I think all male dancers feel a little indebted to Ted Shawn and his men dancers, because one thing that he was trying to do is create a space for men to dance. You know, up until then it had been a very female art form, and he said, you know, he wanted to create something that was, first of all, very American, He saw ballet as this kind of European, bourgeois, elitist thing, and he wanted to create something like, what is American about American dance? And he really expanded who could be put on stage. He was out there, he brought in tribes from Africa, he brought in groups from Poland, from Japan, he brought a lot of Native American dances, put them on stage. And it is kind of wild to look at these films. It was a barn in the woods with no electricity, but it became this festival, which is still around today. Well, I was at NYU, and I was studying Ted Shawn in a very academic way, and feeling kind of limited by that. And I said to my advisor, like, oh, I want to learn some of these dances. I want to reconstruct some of these solos. And then 2 weeks later, I got an email from the Museum of Modern Art saying, we got your email address from your advisor at NYU, and we'd love for you to reconstruct some of these solos, which I was very excited about. As many of you may know, dance typically operates as an oral tradition. You learn the dance from somebody who learned it from somebody who learned it from Jose Limon, or along those lines. It was a little different for Ted Shawn and his men dancers because many of them were drafted in World War II, and almost none of them ever danced again. So, my process of putting these dances back together, it was a lot of teasing through books and photograph and film and rumor and really whatever I could get my hands on. I did find an account of their training regimen, and so I kind of put myself through that. And that included 2 hours of farm work in the mornings, a technique class, which thankfully was notated, so I was able to recreate his technique class. 2 hours of nude sunbathing. Then some more dancing, and then your evening chores, which might be, sewing buttons on your costume or whatever it was. And Ted Shawn's vision there, it was this all-male dance company, and they lived in the woods, and they built their barns, and they grew their own food. And some of that was idealism, it was sort of this principled, lofty notion of what it should be, but it was also the Great Depression, right? So if they didn't grow their own food, they might not have food to eat. So it's sort of an interesting mix of practical and idealism. And I went about learning these solos, and for these performances at MoMA. I learned in my research that Ted Shawn had actually gifted his choreography to the Museum of Modern Art in the 1940s, which, try and put you there, it was a very expansive moment for the museum. They had just started collecting sculpture and photography, and I think maybe they did think for a moment, oh, performance too, maybe we collect performance. And Ted Shawn was, I think, at maybe his most prominent at that time, and so he gifted all of his works to the museum. About 2 decades later, when the public library for the performing arts opened up, they gave all of that material to the library. They're like, hey, actually, we're not doing anything with these trunks that you gave us. We're just going to give it to the library, and that'll be a better place for it. So I kind of made this argument that if he'd been considered an artist, they wouldn't have been allowed to do that, because the museum has these rules about, they can't just give away the work of a living artist, and he was alive at the time. So I kind of came up with this idea using technology. And this is what I'm going to show. This might be a good segue to video number 1. It's a little hard to describe, so I have a little trailer, which I think
You can keep talking, just because it'll take us a little while.
Okay, but basically, I built an app for your smartphone, which uses augmented reality technology, which, if you're aware, it's the same technology that Pokemon Go uses.
We're all out here playing Pokemon Go.
I learned that Ted Shawn had actually made a gift of his life's work to MoMA in the 1940s, but that the museum had given away these materials. I contend that if he'd been considered an artist, they wouldn't have been able to do this. MoMA's own policies are such that they cannot give away the work of a living artist, and Ted Shawn was alive at the time of his deaccession. The idea to install the re-performances in augmented reality came about after the initial live performances. It seemed to me that everyone who was watching the shows was watching me through their smartphones anyway. It's a radio, so why not engage with that? The app works using image recognition technology. Basically, participants can view the re-performances through their smartphones by visiting the galleries where I performed in 2013. The MoMA floor plan map is also rigged, so you can take that home with you or view it online to the same effect. With this project, I wanted to initiate a conversation and insert an alternative way to present performance in museum spaces. How can the museum frame performance appropriately? How to present performance, and what are they doing to preserve it? This was a way for me to put this material back in the museum where he intended it to be. Just as Ted Shawn was using the movement of labor to communicate with ordinary Americans, I wanted to try and find a way to engage with a contemporary audience.
So basically, with this app, you can walk around the museum, and if you hold it up to, say, one of the galleries where I performed, video footage of me performing in that gallery will automatically load onto your phone. And I did this without the museum's consent, but they can't remove it because it's not really there. And so kind of this playful thing of, and it's been very sweet. Well, I was giving a tour kind of recently, and it was for Art Forum. They were doing a piece on, and I was removed by security. And I tried to play it off like, oh, isn't this cool and subversive and not highly embarrassing. But I like to think that they are playing along, because actually their kind of stubbornness gives me something to push against. And so I like to think that this is just a little duet that I have with the Museum of Modern Art. But so right, there's the cheeky thing, it was done without their permission. But it also kind of solved some problems that I found with performing in museum spaces. Because, it's happening more and more, and I think a lot of it is really exciting. And I have performed at MoMA now and Tate Britain, a lot of museums. But it's so strange to me because it's a very different grammar than we're used to. It was a dance exhibit, and they had footage of a friend of mine, Holly Farmer, who's an incredible dancer, doing a Cunningham solo. But then on the wall text, it says Charles Atlas, because that was the videographer who filmed it. And then if you read really closely, it'll say, yeah, Cunningham. But nowhere does it say Holly Farmer's name. It's a very different sort of, yeah. And for example, in the exhibit where I was performing the Ted Shawn works, I wasn't alone. It was called 20 Dancers of the 20th Century, and they had 20 performers representing important choreographers. And it was, it wasn't a complete survey, but there was a lot of important people. Although, if I didn't say aloud who I was and what I was doing, there was no way for anyone to know who I was or what I was doing. So, that's one thing that I liked about this kind of digital installation, because that information was available to you, if you wanted to know further, or like who this person was or why that was important. Is anyone familiar with Yvonne Rayner's work?
Oh,
Yeah.
and the Judson dance.
Right.
And
And,
Barishnikov has brought a lot of attention to her.
there's a moment, her work is quite pedestrian. She was a part of this movement that was taking everyday movements and putting them on stage, and that was radical. But so I remember sitting there watching at the exhibition. Yvonne Rayner had been invited to include her work in this exhibition. She had declined. She was like, I don't want any part of that. One of her dancers decided that she was going to do it. She was going to perform Yvonne Rayner's work, and she was kind of invoking her credentials as she was the subject, and she had a right to perform it. Fine. Yvonne came, and she was sitting on the floor watching this dancer perform work that she had not authorized. And to me, it felt like the walls were shaking, like this was this huge moment. But to the audience, there was just one woman doing something that may or may not be recognizable as dance, and another woman sitting on the floor. It kind of spoke to, I think, a failure to communicate, what was interesting about what was happening to the spectator. But okay, so technology can be fun. I mean, we had our own little hiccups with the sound and everything. I've since taken this project and opened it up to the general public to create their own exhibitions and install them discreetly in these public spaces so that they become kind of like these time capsules. And I recently did that with a group of, a number of groups of autism spectrum young adults, which was really fascinating. Kind of our thesis with that body of work was that, here is a community that really struggles with interpersonal skills, but really loves technology. And, you give them a smartphone and they'll go to town. So you're just like, okay, let's see if we can turn this little, pocket device, like not only into a mode of consumption, but actually a creative tool and an outlet, and encourage expression and communication and all these things. And that's been really exciting. I think we're only just scratching the surface with that. But back to Ted Shawn, because I think another part of what I felt kind of justified this sort of maneuver I made was that he, in a lot of ways, was very prescient. He was at the forefront of technology. I mean, he made a dance film in 1913 with Thomas Edison. And he hated La Bon notation. He thought it was a total waste of time, and instead he had all of his dances filmed, which you would think would make my job as a reconstructor a lot easier, and it does. But I've been really fascinated with how many questions there still are. So we're doing Dance of the Ages right now, which is this epic, weird ballet that tells all of human history in a 4-act interpretive modern dance. And it is all filmed. It's a hand-crank camera. So the tempi are uneven. But the audio was set to the film. And that's the score that we use. So whatever weird tempo variations were in this hand-crank camera are then written into the music, which is then written into what we're doing. Or another example, these were silent films, so if you load them into the projector one way, the dancer's going like this. But you can put it in the other way and just go like that. And you know, we don't know. So, you know, you choose. A lot of times there's a jump cut, and all of a sudden everybody's over there doing something else. And you know, I don't know how they got there. So yeah, there are a lot of questions that come up. I think that we think of film and video as being kind of these true documents, but there's so much that yeah, a lot of questions. Let's see. You know, Laura asked me earlier tonight, you know, why we're doing Dance of the Ages. Like, what made me want to reconstruct this dance? And you know, I think a part of it for sure was I've done a lot of these solo works, but for me, what interests me so much about this company, this vision that Ted had of this group of people living together, working together, eating, growing food, building their barns. You know, it was this whole community, this whole kind of sociality, sort of like utopia that he was creating. And the solos don't really get at that. You know, I really wanted to reconstruct one of his ensemble works so that you can kind of get at that sense of, you know, here's this event that we can only create with everybody's participation. So that's part of it. And Dance of the Ages, I was interested in, not only because it's never been done since, but, you know, so it was written in 1938. You know, World War II had begun. And I feel that you can kind of see it all starting to unravel, like this whole kind of thought experiment that he was doing at Jacob's Pillow. And you can kind of see it in the choreography. And as I researched the piece more and more, I learned that its first title was Towards Democracy. And it was his first overtly political work because he saw democracy itself under attack from fascism and authoritarianism, and he wanted to fight back the only way he knew how, which was by making dances. And unfortunately that resonates today. So, you know, it's a coded work, and I think one that I'm really excited to kind of dig a little deeper with. I do have a kind of a trailer of that work. It's a 4-movement piece. We reconstructed one of the movements last summer and filmed it in this old mill. And I'd like to share that with you now.
So in this section, my concern was with the rhythms of water and the forms of water. I studied brooks and rivers and the ocean in its calm moods and the ocean in its turbulent moods. I studied the whirlpools and the vortices that water makes. And I was even fascinated by patterns of movement underwater. And in various parts of the world, went in glass-bottomed boats and watched the movement of the vegetation as the boat passed through. There's a movement all through this of flow and drift, and of the swirling vortices, the little whirlpools that water makes. Eddies.
What's that about?
Nothing is static, nothing is fixed. Everything is fluid all of the time. and there are counter rhythms. Just as in the sea, you see the incoming water and the wave that has broken on the shore and is receding. There are rhythms of the receding water against the incoming water. And here you have the feeling of something shooting through the underwater vegetation. Solo role is that of the forerunner, the man who has a vision beyond his time. And he is always urging his fellow men to rise beyond themselves, to come with him on up into a higher dimension. The rhythm of this solo was the barcarolle, which is a very powerful water rhythm. But here in its original form you have the solo figure with the obbligato of the group choreography. Always the gesture is one of appeal to them, asking them to rise with him, asking them to go beyond themselves and above themselves into a whole new life and a greater dimension of existence. With the end of the solo, you begin to get the feeling of the turbulence of a storm at sea, of the beginning of the excitement of change and of things to come. Here you have musically a contrapuntal value that is like a four-voice fugue. Various ones, they rise for a moment, but they sink back into their natural element. They get a glimpse of the vision, but the pull of habit and tradition is too strong. But as he keeps appealing, more and more of them rise. And he refuses to leave them until he knows that he has instilled in at least some of them the determination to go with him on into a higher existence and a life of greater dimension.
was it filmed from?
We had a few different, we had a drone, we had somebody in a turret, we had somebody on the ground. It was a fun little film project. Yeah. So that was a piece of what we'll be doing at Jacob's Pillow, September 21, 22, and 23. Though that was not a full cast, and Jacob's Pillow is reconstructing the original costumes, which were beautiful and elaborate and not those black things we were wearing. So I think it'll be, and I'm really enjoying their approach to this. You know, they're parking all these antique cars along the street to really kind of bring you back to that time, and they're treating it like a whole campus-wide event. So I think it'll be a really neat weekend. And we'll see what happens to the piece afterwards, but my hope is that we'll keep touring it, and things like that. Well, I think that there's so much knowledge in this room, and I know that people have a lot of their own connections to this history. I kind of want to open it up and see if you have any questions, thoughts to share, anything like that. Yeah?
Yeah, could you be a little more explicit for those of us who are not technology savvy about how it happened? How do you get it on your? How did you manage to get it on your cell phone? If I don't. Yeah. So I mean, right. So there's an app. You know, you download an app, you open the app, and it uses image recognition. So let's say, like actually, this painting would be perfect. So if I hold my phone up, it sees the painting, and that tells it to immediately load this video into that environment. You can also use geolocation. So let's say you don't want it to be that specific. You just say, okay, when someone's in this room, your phone will start playing something. I like placing it actually on an actual object. It kind of has this like Harry Potter effect, where it's like the thing starts moving. It was, I'll be honest, challenging at MoMA because it's just white walls. I mean, because the artwork changes. You can't use the artwork that's on the wall. So we had to use, you know, like the exit signs and things, permanent features that were enough for your phone to recognize, but that also would still be there. Because the idea was that this would exist forever. You know, I don't know how forever will be, but I'm pretty sure it's still there. I haven't been recently because, like I said, I was removed by security. So, you don't have to have been there.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
I used footage that was shot in the museum because we had footage of me dancing in the museum, but the footage could have been anything, shot anywhere. It's basically that you tell the phone what you want the trigger to be, and then you load the content that you want it to trigger, and really it takes no time at all. That's all you need to do. Because I'm not, you know, I went to dance school, which is basically clown college. Like, I don't code. They do make it very easy. It sounds very, it sounds impressive, but it really was, like if you can make a Facebook page, you can make your own augmented reality site-specific dance installation. Yeah?
I have a question.
Yeah.
This transgression of the traditional frame,
Yeah.
how does it affect your creativity or encourages, liberates you? I'd like to know that.
Yeah. Well, you know, I said it in the trailer, this little thing of, because I was doing the live performances, and it really did feel like everyone was watching me like that. Anyway, I mean, kind of, my joke is that people don't know that I'm not actually there. So
So you
I-
like that?
well, I was trying to wrap my mind around, like, okay, there is this new way that people behave, and like, rather than telling everyone, okay, put your phones away, like, how do we harness that and do something creative with that, rather than, because you see that in theaters, you know, where they're making it dead zones, or they're constantly telling everyone to turn everything off, and like, I'm not sure that's really going to work in the long run. Like, I feel like we have to join up with this thing, and you know, I'm not saying everything needs to happen, you know, on your phone. This is a little gross, but I'm going to tell you a little story. I went to see this dance performance where at intermission they served pigs in a blanket, and then after intermission you came back and it was a duet, and the dancer ate a hot dog, and then she spit it into this other dancer's mouth, and then they spit it back into the other dancer's mouth, and they just kept doing that. But you in the audience could also taste it in your mouth. And like, I thought that was brilliant. You know, all of a sudden the dance is in your mouth. You know? And so it's a little bit like that, you know, right, like maybe this is the new proscenium stage. Or, you know, maybe it could be. I don't know. Yeah. Yes?
You mentioned in passing that Ted Shawn is not as well known today as some of his students and perhaps his contemporaries. Can you tell us a little more about why you think that is?
Yeah, you know, and I don't have the answer. The wars definitely didn't help. Like, he had to fold his first company because of World War I, and then all of his men were drafted in World War II, and he didn't make a third company. So I think that was part of the problem. You know, it might have been because he was a homosexual. Like, I think that was not easy in the 30s. Like, or maybe his choreography just isn't that good. You know, like, I mean,
What do you think? I certainly think it's good.
yeah, well, you know, I do find it a little bit baffling, and he also did. He was so jealous of Martha Graham. And he actually made this really weird dance where he dressed up like her, and he did the turns around the back in a wig. But also, I think that he, at a certain point, maybe because of the wars, maybe some other reason, kind of shifted his attention to creating this institution, which is the longest running dance festival in the US. So, you know, I don't think he failed by any stretch. I mean, he certainly was a personality, he was a thinker, a writer, you know. So I think maybe he just shifted his focus from having a touring company to creating a lasting, like, infrastructure for dance. Yeah.
What's going on at the library for the performing arts with his archive now? Anything?
You know, what's wild, that they keep finding new stuff. Like, they found 43 boxes of material just this summer, previously unknown. And you know, how to kind of take that material and like invigorate it, I think, is a question. And we're talking a lot because they you know, they'd say like, hey Adam, like, come and do a show in our space. It's kind of hard though, you know, because they don't have, we're still trying to figure out exactly what that might be. But they have a lot of material, and they are open-minded about what to do with it. You know, it's not easy, but it is wild to me that how much they have. I did a performance at the Williams College Museum of Art a few months ago. They have this fantastic exhibition up right now, mostly about the costumes that Ted Shawn and Ruth St. Denis created together. And and we performed at the opening reception. Although I kind of wish that we'd actually been a part of the whole exhibition. Like, I think it would have been really exciting to. But anyway, we didn't. Although, you know, actually, Pam's favorite thing that we did. There's a. You know, we did. It's like there are these solos I can do, and those solos. You know, we have like a little repertory of things that aren't that hard for us to like whip out. But we wanted to do something special for Williams College, and there is this solo called Death of Adonis, which he wrote in 1924, and there are only 5 known photographs of it, and we don't know what the music was. And it's him, he's painted white, and it's on a column, and then we know these 5 poses that he did. So we took that, and rather than trying to reinvent like what the solo might have been or what music might have been, we put a dancer on there, and he cycled through those 5 positions in incredibly slow motion. And for 1 hour and 45 minutes, he was just up there cycling through shape after shape. And it was exciting, I think, because it made you see the material in a different way, which I think is always a nice thing when you are reconstructing these dances. And I think that's been a big part of my mission also. Like with this MoMA app, I stopped counting, but it had 10,000 downloads in its first year, which is, you know, not viral by internet standards. But for archival modern dance, you know, that's significant. And it's like, how are we going to get like a new audience, a different audience? Because it was picked up by a lot of tech blogs. You know, it was on the cover of Time Out New York magazine. So, you know, I think that, because like I'm obviously like a big dance nerd, and like I love this stuff, and I could spend hours, but I understand that not everyone is like that. So if you can create, you know, new ways of seeing the material or new ways in, then like that's how we're gonna give it life, right? Yeah. Hi.
I know he died in the early 70s, I think, but can you talk about when he was born, his family background, his education, and how he got into dance, and
Yeah.
what the environment was?
Well, I can tell you the official story, which I've heard debunked. But he trained to become a minister, went to ministerial school, and he had an illness, a strange mystery illness, where he was bedridden for a year or so, and and it was ballet that got him to get use of his limbs back. I'm friends with the guy who's writing his biography, and he just says that there's no way that's true. Like that's not a thing. But that's, you know, the official story. And his first company was in LA. That's where he got involved with early film, and he was in these production houses, and then he kind of realized that he needed to get to New York, and he and his dance partner made this deal with the then Amtrak, where they got a free one-way, coast-to-coast train ticket in exchange that they perform at every station stop along the way, which I think is so cool. And then he ditched that girl and hitched up with Ruth St. Denis, who was a very famous dancer at the time. And the two of them started a school and started making dances together. And Jacob's Pillow came later. It was kind of it was 1930, 31, 32, something like that he wanted to leave the city. He wanted to kind of create a sustaining environment for dance, because he didn't think that you could really I mean, much like people complain today about how, it's hard to live on a dancer's salary in New York City, but he found that then, and he wanted to create a space where you could work professionally, live well, eat well, all that. And so, yeah, they toured mostly in the winters, and then in the summers they would create new work. They had this school, and he kept that going until his death in 72. And I was talking with Nick earlier about he would just kind of go up to farmers or like football players or any kind of athletic looking dude and get them to join his dance company. And there's a sweet line, and there's a great documentary about the men dancers, and they would talk about, because it was very unusual what they were doing, and they'd be in their tour van, which just said Shawn on it, and they'd be at the gas station, and people would be like, "Oh, what are you?" And a lot of the time they'd be like, "Oh, well, we're this group of men dancers, and men dance now, and that's a thing." And but sometimes they'd be too tired to go into the whole thing. And so people are like, "Oh, what is this?" Like, "Oh, it's a new kind of mayonnaise." Because it's hard to be an ambassador, all the time. Yeah.
What is the name of the town for this space? I know it's an old shirt factory.
Huh.
I had the inspiring moments of dancing there myself with Dunya McPherson, a Woods Hole girl who grew up here. Maybe you know her. She held a dance retreat there. And I can't recall the name of the town. What is the name of the town where that ballet took place, the Ages?
Oh,
I know it's near Hudson, New York,
huh.
and it's off the Taconic, but I can't remember the name of the town. But if you can't remember it, it's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay, because the space is so inspiring.
Huh. Oh, wow.
I know, I was there. I know.
How long ago?
In spite of the stone you have to dance on,
Right.
it's just inspiring to,
Yeah.
the sky is above you and it's so large too, it's a huge space.
Wow. Is that?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Tell us who you
Where
are.
was, where was this filmed?
This was filmed in Philmont at an old mill.
I like that.
He
says
Philmont. Okay.
But yeah, this
That's
was in
what
Philmont.
Yeah.
Is that the town?
Yeah.
Yeah, no
So
Marley.
you know that.
No, I don't. I just wondered about the clip.
Thank
Yes.
I have
Hi.
just my opinion, but I think he vastly improved his very pedantic choreography by filming it from a drone. I really think if you're going to stick to trying to do recreations of Ted, your idea to use technology to, shall we be kind and say, embellish it, is a really good idea.
Well,
And,
thank you.
for anybody that wants to read more about Ted Shawn, he has a wonderful autobiography called 1001 Night Stands, among many other books that he wrote.
Yeah.
But I wondered what your take on what Agnes de Mille said about him in her biography of Martha Graham is.
Yeah, I mean, it's a funny thing dealing with dance legacy and kind of updating works. I have a lot of friends in the Lamone Company or the Martha Graham Company, and they're always talking about, oh, well, that seems a little dated now, we should change that, or what if we use new music for this? And I had kind of mixed feelings about that. And also, especially with Ted Shawn's work, when people don't know what the original was. How can I change something? Because people won't even know what that's in conversation with, or I don't know. So I've decided to be as true as I can to what he wrote, but then get as creative as I can in how to present it, if that makes sense. But yeah, you know, Agnes was a very intelligent woman.
Very scathing.
Yeah.
She just threw him right off a pedestal.
Yeah, you know, he's an easy target in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And I think that it took the Pillow a while to trust me to work with his choreography. I think because they've been bruised in the past by people coming in and just kind of poking fun at him. But I think now I've kind of convinced them that I'm, you know, I have good intentions. But yeah, it's a tricky thing. Yeah. Yes.
In those early films, that you said he used that instead of the notation to record his choreography. Did you have any wonderful finds like Martha Graham as a student in those, or famous people when they were first starting out? Were they in the,
we did find what might be footage of Doris Humphrey, which, and she is someone who resisted being recorded, kind of at all costs. But there is this one little nymph in a green dress who flutters across the stage. It's like 3 seconds long, but we were we were very excited about that. Yeah, I mean,
Where did you find that?
in the archives at Jacob's Pillow, you know, it's a wonderful place if you have, you know, a spare summer. Yeah.
What about the music? What he chose, what you choose, do you, on the apps, and when you do reconstruction, are you trying to pick music from that period, or
Yeah,
how do you choose?
For these performances at the Pillow, we're going to use live music. And it's actually going to be played by the person who studied under the man who toured with the men dancers. So we're very excited about that. Although I think it will be interesting because I like these old piano recordings. I feel like there's something about the quality of the sound that kind of puts you in that place. And I think it'll feel very different when it's live music and a kind of a contemporary sounding piano. But yeah, it has been interesting. Like he did this suite called Four Solos based on American folk music. And it was really interesting to kind of study, like, well, who were the popular folk musicians at the time? And kind of fall down that rabbit hole for a little while. Yeah. And like, for example, we found the old manuscript of the piano score, and it's written in pencil. And there were certain measures that were scribbled out, and certain measures that were covered by Post-it notes and other little things here and there. And then we found later copies of the piano score where those measures were not scribbled out. And we're like, well, but this is the original. You know what I mean? Like, what is the what? You know, did he mean for that to be scribbled out? I don't know. Like all these questions that we're just kind of making educated guesses about.
There must be an archive of live annotation, and I was wondering if any modern dance groups that are reconstructing dances from the past are using.
Yeah. You know, the Forsyth Company is doing really interesting things using technology with notation. You know, it gets very complicated where it's like color, because it's hard to, it's a lot of information to pack on a page, because it's how it travels through space, what various body parts are doing, you know, what you might be emoting or not emoting. And yeah, William Forsythe, who has done a lot of interesting work with technology, created an app for this dance, which they then they did it at Juilliard. And the director of Juilliard said like he had no idea how it worked. They just handed out iPads to these 12 students, and he's never seen a piece learned so quickly. It was like, oh, he didn't get how it worked, but these kids, they just like, oh, okay. So, so it's interesting. Although, you know, I never learned a dance notation form. I've made dances, I choreographed an opera, a Baroque opera in Germany last year, and I found a bunch of old Baroque dance notations, and I just sort of used them for inspiration and thought of squiggly lines and stuff. But like, I've never been trained, which kind of surprises me because I've trained at a lot of, you know, like I went to the School of American Ballet, I went to Juilliard, I went to all these, like if I don't know how to do any of these things, like who's teaching people that? I think there was this idea that film, like, oh, well, we don't need notation because now we can just film everything. But it's a very imperfect record. Yeah.
Martha Graham didn't notate.
No?
No, all the films that are at the library at the Lincoln Center, those are the only things that people use, but she never liked it.
Yeah.
So she has a company and it continues.
Yeah. Yeah.
But she had a lead dancer, important dancer who taught those dances. What's her name? The Yuki.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, she taught those dances still. And I'm assuming that at Cunningham they're turning it out by handing it off, saying this is what we learned. This I don't know. What are they doing?
Right. And Cunningham strikes me as easier than most.
You would, I don't know.
But then he also decided for that company to not continue after his passing.
But it does continue.
It does continue. I mean, the company doesn't, but the work does. Yeah. Whereas like William Forsythe, for example, when he dies, no one's allowed to perform his work anymore.
Oh.
And you know, it was interesting because it actually makes his work less valuable.
Yes.
Because you know he could be hit by a bus tomorrow, so that $200,000 you spent licensing his work is gone.
What's the reason?
He says two reasons. He doesn't want to see the work get unsupervised. He also wants to create space for new voices, which I think those are both, you know, valid points.
But then we wouldn't have Balanchine or Justin Peck or anybody like that. I mean,
Yeah,
and we have a dancer at the head of the Juilliard now.
I know. And it's also, I think, gotten, like in Ted Shawn's day, for example, this whole idea of people owning movement and like making up, like, oh, like that's my Tom, that didn't exist yet. And that was, I think, one of the ways that dance helped popularize it. Because like, you'd go to see Isadora Duncan, you'd like it, so then you'd just copy it and do something like it. And that's how it popularized and disseminated. And this whole thing of intellectual property came about much later. Yeah.
I just wanted to say something about lamentation. It is the most extensive and accurate way to notate dance, but it takes a long time. It can take from 1 year to 5 years, depending on the length of the work, to completely notate it. So the reason that you weren't trained is because it's a 5-year program. You can go to university in London, to the Levin Institute, and learn it. And there are very few notators living in existence to do that, but
Right.
and they're very expensive to hire. So a big ballet company like Royal Ballet will hire somebody in, and they have the Benish form of notation, which is a little bit easier and more user-friendly for classical ballet, but not for other kinds of movement. To accurately do any kind of movement from hammering to ballet to modern dance, you really need a Laban score. So a big ballet company will hire in a notator, and they'll spend a year there in all the rehearsals writing. It's an incredibly laborious thing. It's not something you want to do if you want to have a dance career. Although many of those people were serious dance students, otherwise they couldn't have done it. And so if you want to stage an Ashton work, you hire not only somebody who danced the work in the Royal Ballet, but you would hire a Laban notator to come in and work in conjunction with them. The problem is, with film, that every dancer makes small changes, and so if you want it really accurate, you need the combination of the video, which shows the mood and the feeling, and the Laban notation. And if you want it really, really accurate, you have to have the choreographer, which is why most choreographers have it in their contract that every 2 years or so they have to go in and look at the rehearsal when the work is restaged, because they want some element of control over it.
Yeah. That makes sense. Yeah.
One more